think about it, a city, Paris, an international city, basically any location where people would gather is going to be closed in order to prevent the possibility of there being another attack. Is that correct?
I think that's what it shows. I think that's what it demonstrates. You could say also probably in solidarity with the victims, but I think it also demonstrates that there is some uncertainty about exactly whether this is all over.
And it's obviously a very wise move. I mean, we saw in the wake of Charlie Hebdo, as we all remember, not only the initial attack on Charlie Hebdo, but then, there was different gunmen going in different locations, and what ended up days later with 2 standoffs in 2 separate locations, and more people lost their lives. So obviously prudence on the part of authorities there. Jim will continue checking with you throughout this hour. Just before airtime, I spoke with a woman. Charlotte Brejo is her name. She was in one of the restaurants that came under attack. Listen to her experience. Charlotte, you were eating at the restaurant. Walk us through what happened.
I was eating at the restaurant with a friend of mine. All of a sudden we heard huge gunshots and lots of glass coming through the window. So we ducked onto the floor with all of the other diners, and we heard numerous more gunshots coming through the window, and shards of glass were hitting people lying down on the floor. I was holding a woman's arm next to me, and when I suddenly started to process what was happening, was asking around if people were okay, and I realised that she had been fatally wounded. She had been shot in the chest, and there was blood all around her, and there were other people in the restaurant as well who had been fatally injured.
How crowded was the restaurant?
It was really busy. It was a Friday night in Paris. It's quite a young area, so it was quite lively, and it's a small restaurant, only 40 people I would say eating there. It's like 30 square meters, so it was a small place to target, and yeah, there was a lot of a feeling of terror, I think, and panic amongst everybody there.
Could you see any of the shooters or the shooter? Do you know if there were multiple people?
I didn't see anything. I immediately looked away from where the glass and the gunshots were firing, so I didn't see any shooters. I believe there was more than one. It sounded like there would be more than one, and it also sounded as if they'd stopped to reload, and then they reloaded again, and then more gunshots fired the second time around.
Was it your sense that they had actually entered the restaurant, or were they shooting from the street?
They were shooting from the street, and I heard reports that there was a drive-by, so that makes some sense. It seemed as if they weren't coming in, and I think the initial shock of there being casualties in the restaurant and shots going into the restaurant, after that we were waiting to see whether or not they would come in, but they didn't, thankfully.
Do you have any idea how many people were wounded and or killed?
I saw personally maybe 3 or 4 people fatally wounded. I saw people with some blood over them, but I didn't have time to make that kind of estimation. I've since heard that 7 people were fatally wounded in the restaurant that I was in, but I'm not sure. Personally, I felt as soon as we hit the floor that the first thing I thought of were the Charlie Hebdo attacks. So since that, I've not been very surprised to hear that there's been a correlation that's been made. It was the same kind of feeling of dread and uncertainty that we had in January this year.
But the woman whose hand you were holding, or whose arm you were holding, she died.
I don't know. I don't know. I was holding her hand, and somebody asked me if she was breathing, and I looked at her, and I saw a pool of blood next to her, and I couldn't tell. I thought maybe she'd been conscious, but to be honest, it happened so quickly, and no one was in a state to be able to do anything because people were just sort of frozen in shock. So I don't know. I don't know what happened to her.
How long did this go on for? You said it seemed like they paused to reload and then shot again. Do you have a sense of how long the entire incident was?
I think it probably wasn't very long. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 minutes maximum. It felt like longer.
What happened once the shots stopped?
People waited for a couple of minutes because we weren't sure whether or not someone would come back into the restaurant or would come into the restaurant at all. And then once we thought the coast was clear, myself and the person that I was with, who'd gone for dinner, we ran out onto the street, and I live 15 minutes away from the restaurant, so we ran straight to my house.
Are you okay?
Absolutely fine. It was really strange because I was with a friend and we were sat right at the window where the shots came through, and they missed both of us. And like I said, it was really a small restaurant, so it was strange and extremely lucky that we both came out of it okay. And I'm just thankful, and I'm just praying, really praying that the people who were there, who were hurt, make it through.
Well, Charlotte, thank you so much for talking to us, and I'm so glad you're okay, and I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Charlotte Brehat, she was in the Cambodian restaurant that was hit, and as we reported earlier in the last hour, I want to give you just the breakdown. We now know the latest figures were that 14 people are believed to at least 14 people were believed to have been killed inside that restaurant. So she was saying it's a restaurant that maybe had 40 or so people in it. She was very lucky to survive. 112 at least killed at the Bataclan concert venue. Another 19 people killed, some shootings outside Bar La Belle Equipe, also 4 on the Avenue de la République, and then 4 outside the stadium where there was believed to be a suicide attack. We're also getting some information from the United States State Department. I want to give this across particularly to those who have family members maybe living or visitors who are in Paris at this time, or for anybody who is living in Paris, any Americans living in Paris at this time who are listening to us on CNN International. This is some logistical information that the State Department is trying to get across. The hotline for the State Department is obviously being flooded with calls from Americans who are concerned about loved ones in Paris. They're trying to take information about Americans in Paris. They're passing it on to the embassy, where officials are trying to figure out the welfare of each American currently in France or in Paris. Obviously, that is a very laborious process. Some things that would help them, any U.S. citizens who are in Paris right now, who are safe and okay, are being asked by the State Department to please call their families, to do this as soon as possible. Even though it's very late there in Paris, please call your families in the United States to let them know that you are okay, so that they are not then calling the State Department as well, and tying up anybody who may actually need help. So Americans needing assistance who are there should call 011-202-501-4444. Now, the number you see on your screen, that is for you, those in the United States concerned about loved ones who are in Paris. So if you're concerned about your loved ones in Paris and you're in the United States, call 1-888-407-4747. If you are in France and you need assistance, this is only for people in France needing assistance, 011-202-501-4444. But most importantly, if you are an American in Paris, the U.S. State Department would very much like you to call your families. Please let them know that you are okay.